So today our guest is trumpeter Greg Glassman, a Brooklyn native and longtime fixture of the New York City jazz scene. A student of greats like Marcus Belgrave and Clark Terry, Greg has toured the world with a wide range of projects from Burning Spear to Taylor Mac and holds down one of the city's longest running residencies at Cellar Dog, previously known as Fat Cat. With a deep discography and passion for mentorship, Greg's voice on the trumpet is both rooted and refreshingly bold, and we are live. So, Greg, thanks for doing this. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So, Greg, when did you come to New York? What year was it after finishing college exactly?
So I lived here. I took a semester off of college and lived here, like, I guess that's 97, and then moved here full time in 98. So, like, 96, I guess, was when I started sheepishly walking down into Small's jazz club. And yeah, then full time since 1998.
So that's 27 years, almost three decades. I mean, so and you were even here before 9/11 too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So,
remember.
let's go back to when you first came to New York in 98 because there's people listening who maybe they're thinking they should go to New York. What were the first moves you made in terms of like putting yourself out there and getting your career started? Do you remember the
Well,
decisions you made?
really, it was I just literally was out every night. Uh, I was just hanging out. At that time, I lived in Harlem. I've only lived in two places as an adult in New York, which is very rare for people my age. But so at this time, I was living on 127th and Lenox in Harlem, and I would go to Gerald Hayes at the St. Nick's pub on St. Nicholas Avenue, and he actually gave me my first gig, as I remember it, of somebody that I met cold at that time in my life. But yeah, I would basically just go out literally every night. Smalls, Cleopatra's Needle, St. Nick's Pub, Showman's. I probably am forgetting a lot of spots, but yeah.
Did you have to do other sorts of gigs though besides jazz when you were starting? Like whether it was like wedding bands or any type of gigs you didn't necessarily want to do?
Yeah, yeah, like everyone finds their way to pay the rent. I mean, first of all, when I first moved to town, my rent was so cheap that you could string together a few, $50, $100 gigs and eat rice and beans and you're cool. But then I did spend many years sort of stabilizing my income with wedding bands. And I would say, I met so many great people doing that, great musicians, but I would say I did it too long for my mental well-being,
Yeah.
too much for too long.
Yeah, I understand. Did you meet any musicians who were surprisingly jazz musicians that were doing those gigs that you established relationships with?
Well, I'm sure I did. It's interesting on those gigs in general. It's not always true, but in general, the rhythm section, like if you go on one of these standard top 40 R&B funk wedding band gigs, the rhythm section might be literally the greatest funk musicians alive in the whole world, right? And then the horn players would sometimes be jazz people. So I definitely met and ended up collaborating with plenty of musicians from other genres through that. But the horn players can kind of fake it through the gig. Not every horn player, but we can pick up the horn lines on the spot. But if you are the bass player in a top 40 band, you have to know that repertoire inside and out in a way that a horn player doesn't. But yeah.
Yeah, but you also said it was for your mental well-being that you had to stop doing that. So that's when you
Well,
decided you were just going to play jazz full time and do other things.
yeah, I mean, slowly you build up, the phone rings a little more and more every year that goes by. And so I felt like, I would probably be okay, financially if I made that choice. And
How
it
many
has
years in was that though? Like when like since
maybe
arriving though, would you say?
15, 15 years in. Yeah. And I guess, people are better and worse at compartmentalizing, but for me, maybe I'm on the sensitive side. Like, it just sort of wore me down. Like, uh, you spend your whole life dedicating yourself to music and to an instrument, and then you're in an environment where it really doesn't matter what you do. If you have the right tuxedo, you're not gonna, no one's gonna really notice. So, I, I,
Yeah, they don't
be,
care if you've been spending your entire, life or most of it just studying jazz. They just want to see if you can. I mean, I know as person, I've been fired from every wedding band I've been in.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it basically just became, it's not like every gig I do now is jazz, but I would say almost every gig that it really cemented out of the pandemic for whatever reason. But every time I leave for work these days, I'm basically there to be myself, as opposed to fill execute a trumpet job. Now, I still enjoy, going in the studio and reading something and doing a good job and all of that. And every once in a while I can do anything, but I have to say it's proven to be a really great decision to sort of like shift that way. I think in the pandemic, is the first time for a lot of us that we had any routine, right? The first time in my adult life that I went to bed and woke up at the same time, for sure. And it was a lot of cooking dinner for my three-person family at night. And along with slowly going out of my mind, not playing, it sort of established this thing of like, if I'm going to leave my house, um, I want to do it to, be myself on my instrument. So that's sort of been the vibe since the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're in a good place to be in that position and really pursue the art you want to make. At this point in your career, what are some of the things that you still want to do? If there are certain things, whether it's goals or you'd like to work with certain people or see or play in certain places, are there still things that you think about?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, uh, like, I would love to be of more assistance, in a lot of different ways, I guess. I would like to be, to help people creatively with their projects. I have a good mind for composing and arranging and sort of like big picture, thinking. So, I would enjoy getting involved in that way a little bit more.
Like you mean on the production side of things?
Yeah, I mean, making music sound better, so, having other artists reach their potential. But, I find it to be a very strange time, for recorded music, for all these different reasons. And so I really do find myself settling into, like, the most satisfying stuff for me is to get called to play with some incredible musicians in New York and, go there and do it. Playing live, I think like it's going to be one of the last things computers can do. We're going to get rarer and rarer, and, it's testament. Like there are these, like for instance, this newer spot, Ornithology in Brooklyn. It's a very They're sitting in folding chairs like 3 feet from you, and it's in general the audience is like 25 and under, and they're captivated by seeing people in a room that sounds good, people who have, really masters on their instrument, dedicated their whole life to an instrument. There's something I think increasingly relevant actually about the live performance, the, passion in front of you, in a room together. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought that after the pandemic, there was just going to be more of an appreciation for live music, people just being able to, as you're saying, be in person for that. And I do think that exists, but there's also the other component of like, you can't help but people are still not fully in the moment on their phones and stuff. And I guess we're all guilty of it to some extent. But
Well, totally. I mean, again, like, so this maybe is speaking to my sensitivities, but, I used to really, it used to really get me down. Like, you could feel like you and your band, you're really on top of your game, like you're having a great night. And then you look out and you see people inevitably, like half paying attention, whatever. But my thinking on this has totally changed
You mean
where
was it distracting in the beginning, or you just
it was
didn't think of it?
distracting and sort of like disconcerting, but the way I think about it now, like the pull is so great, right? Everyone has this thing in their pocket all the time that's like telling them to like, like pay attention to me. I have the most exciting, outrageous shit to show you, in your pocket while you're doing anything. And of course, people's attention spans are affected. I have a 10-year-old child. Like, I think about this a lot in terms of, her life or whatever. But the point is like, if you get someone to pay attention to what you're doing, like one person, to not be on their phone and to be in the moment, like in a collective experience, in a physical space. Now in 2025, I think of that as an absolute miracle. Like if you connect with one person in the audience that you didn't know, like that's a fucking miracle. And so I try to remember this, like I do believe in it. I believe in the power of the music and like being together in a physical space. I really do. But the odds are against us, and you're not going to change the whole world of technology by playing extra good one night. But you can't, we do it all the time. We touch individual people all the time.
Yeah, I believe the direct impact comes from reaching the masses in any way possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be through one way. I just think that's where we have the most impact as artists. So after you finish a gig and it's like a really good one, spiritually enlightening experience, are you able to kind of enjoy that feeling for a little bit? Or are you the type of person that the next day you wake up and you're on to the next gig, you're on to pursuing, waiting for the next thing? Like, talk to me a little bit about that process of once the gig is over.
Well, so it makes me think about, I think, an underrated quality of masterful jazz music, or like the lineage, the true jazz music. There is a day in, day out quality, a mundane like quality to it. So like to me, I can always tell somebody who was like a prodigy and went to jazz school and then went straight from jazz school to like jazz, playing at a jazz festival or something. Like from jazz school, like people who skipped the part where they like work a gig, many nights a
You're
week
talking
for.
about paying your dues in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't like to romanticize the hard parts, the cruel parts, but there is something to me fundamental about the greatest musicians of this genre. They all involve working gigs, right? A personal experience of working a gig. And so I actually forget the original question. Right. So after a gig, like I do sort of treat it like it's just daily life, right? Like I don't work every night, but I work enough so that it's not a rare experience to be playing, and especially now, playing interesting music for people. And there are, I mean, there's definitely better nights and worse nights. But I would say, yeah, I would say one part of it is getting older. I sort of, have gotten better at chilling my critical mind out. And then also, it's like, no matter how good it is, it's never like, that was it. That night, that was the culmination. Like I know it's never gonna be like that. I know some of the greatest music I will ever make in my whole life has been to like 10 people at 2:30 in the morning already. Um,
Do you ever feel
so
though that like the best music you've played was just by yourself when you were just at home or something like that? Or even in a session where it was no one was even there? Or just kind
uh,
of curious.
It's it's a hard thing for me because um like I could say like I came up with some of my more interesting lines, or I was in a zone or something in the practice room, but for me the music is very much like interacting with a band and interacting with the energy, if not literally with the audience, like the energy from the room of the audience. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also appreciate how you said there's something that people who just they don't have to put in that. Listen, everyone has their own story. Yeah, the people, but that just happened to be what the case is for them. That they automatically get picked up by someone, or and then the rest of it is they don't really have to worry about those struggles. And
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
almost like maybe is it could be that there may be some struggling. I mean, because you want to feel like you're pushing, I guess, when you play this music and searching for something and not just being automatic. And there could be a certain little element, even if it's a small tiny percentage, that might be missing in that way.
yeah. I mean, I think a few things. I think um it's not what I'm not saying is that that isn't good or those players aren't good. Like I think like it's a matter of taste in a way.
You just can't
Um
relate to them. Is that what you're saying, like
well, I'm
personally?
saying like all of the music that makes me that I am authentically all the way in love with, the players that I could just listen to every day for the rest of my life and feel happy. Like there is a quality to all of that music, and including the people, the people that I am in community with in New York City. I am not somebody who like goes through and listens to the records they've released into the world, right? I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just because, but what I know of them is out in the world, seeing them live, and I see so much music live, and it's a quality that all the people that I love to listen to, it's a quality that they all have. So I think there is something, you know, even like you listen to someone like Bud Powell, right? The mastery of Bud Powell, right? But there is a quality there, whereas like what he's doing, it's about what he did yesterday and it's about what it's going to be tomorrow. Like he plays the piano for many hours every single day. He's worked a gig, like this is in addition to the obvious genius, right? Like not everyone is Bud Powell, but there is a quality there through all of the proficiency to me that I hear that is a working musician,
Well, I
you
almost
know.
feel like it's like when you go back and look, like you're talking about Bud Powell, for instance, all of those people who created the music, the masters, the pioneers, like it's not, like you're saying, like you might play or something, but it's never going to be like 100% or something like that. But like, I feel like the people who pioneered that, like there's that quality, there's something about, because I guess they made it up, and we just happen to hear it that way. You know what I mean? It's, that
Yeah,
you don't hear those things in the records, I guess.
yeah, yeah. But you do hear humanness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear a lot of humanity, so it's another way of getting at this sort of nebulous quality that I'm talking about. But like Coltrane Walk the Bar, like all the early pianists played solo piano gigs, for parties and occasions, I don't know. I hear that day in, day out, mundane quality, even, through the genius. Yeah.
Yeah. It's do you still go back and listen to some of these, trumpeters that some of the records that you find yourself revisiting still?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, again, better for worse, I'm much more of like the way I, consumed music when I was a teenager, a younger person. It's like I can't actually relate to it anymore. I don't know. Like when I go to a museum, like an art museum, it's like the more I love what I'm looking at, the less time I can really take being in the museum, right? And it's like there is a time, I don't know how it is for everybody, but there's that time in my life, like I always tell students, like I recommend this to students, but it's basically just because it's the only thing I did and it worked for me. Like to listen, to fall asleep listening to the same record over and over and over for like month, 2, 3 months, right? Um, for me, it was, it was a lot of Fats Navarro, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and I feel like these records, like it could have been other records, but these records to me are like my complete foundation. It's like my neighbor made me a mixtape of Tad Dameron and Fats Navarro when I was in high school, and I was hooked. I could not believe how great it was.
Yeah, and the other thing too, like you're talking about the music you listen to, like, I don't, people will compare people, oh, this person sounds like this person or XYZ, but even just that stuff that you're talking about, the music that was your foundation, no one has the exact same thing, even if they went to the same school or so. It's just like there's that unique part. That's just one of those things that makes it.
Yeah, yeah. And like yeah, so I mean I think that in general I have jived musically through the years mostly with people who have also consumed that music. It's hard for me to imagine someone not getting Charlie Parker and then like us like really I don't know, maybe that's not true. But I feel, you know, let's take Fats Navarro, Tad Dameron, that whole school, right? Like, that is a specific sub-language of bebop, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so when people are in love with those sounds, like I am, there's just a thing that we're gonna get about each other. Yeah.
No, that's great. No, Greg, this has been such a pleasure to sit and talk with you and get your perspective on everything. And just want to say thank you so much for spending some time with the podcast.
Thanks for getting in touch.